Number one, you've heard me say it before, cranking the dose up too high, too fast. These peptides are not designed to be overdosed on, yet that seems to be what the standard protocol is. Now, that's not to say every doctor's doing it that way. A lot of smart doctors that I'm hearing from are dosing the patient up to tolerance to where they're getting the results they want and they're not cranking them over. The normal escalation pathway of the brand name is a 16-week escalation where they essentially double the dose every month. I personally think the starting dose is too high in most cases, but these are pre-filled pens and there's not a lot we can do with it unless we go with a compounded version. So cranking the dose up too high, too fast is a surefire way to run smack into horrific side effects, severe nausea, crush your appetite, lose weight abruptly, end up with Ozempic face and Ozempic butt, and have a whole host of terrible things happen downstream to your metabolic health. If you lose all of your muscle mass in the process of starving yourself as you overdose on these peptides or are overdosed on them, you will end up with no muscle. And then quite literally will gain all the weight back and when you go off of them, and now you're left with no muscle and that weight is replaced solely by fat. It's a disaster. I cannot emphasize this enough. That is a complete disaster and a terrible way to do things. That will leave folks worse off than when they started. Number two way to royally screw yourself when using Ozempic is to try to push through the nasty side effects. If you're getting nausea and vomiting, you're dosed too high, period. So you need to talk to your prescribing practitioner. These are prescription-only medications. You need to talk to the person who is running that prescription, and you need to come to an agreement on how you can either back down or figure out what's going on. Maybe you switch to a different one, but you don't need to push through nasty side effects. They're completely unnecessary when this is done correctly. Number three, continuing to eat non-nutrient dense, crappy food, only less of it. You know who you are. I'm not pointing any fingers or laying any blame, but if you're accustomed to eating a diet of garbage and you simply just choose to eat a smaller portion of that garbage, you're still going to be left malnourished and you're still going to be left in a pickle and you're going to end up in scenario number one that I just shared with you. So do not starve yourself of the nutrients you need. Eating less volume of crappy food is not the solution. You only have so much room in that stomach bag. It's a pouch, it's a bag, and you only have so much room in there. So make sure that what you put in it counts, because this is not something you can catch up with later. If your appetite is being suppressed and you're on a weight loss journey. Now, side note, if you go back and listen to my other podcasts, I'm talking about using GLP-1 agonists at very different doses for very different reasons. But in this case, we're just going with what the average person is using it for, which is usually weight loss, type 2 diabetes. You can't catch up later. You can't just look at your watch at 8 o'clock at night. Does anyone even wear a watch anymore? You can't do that and decide you didn't get any of your protein macros in for the day and try to stuff those in. You just can't do it. There's no way. You can't catch up. You will overstuff yourself. You will end up sick. You'll be up all night with a stomach ache, and that's not a fun place to be. So make the foods you eat count and don't just eat a smaller portion of the crappy foods you're used to eating. That is not going to land you long-term on the success track with these. Number 4, trying to continue to crush high-fat fried foods and ultra-refined carbohydrates. This seems to be the two food groups that get people the worst when it comes to the side effects with these GLP-1 agonists, even those of my patient base who I'm dosing on microdoses. If they eat something that's fatty, and I'm talking generally like the not so healthy fats, but if not like a ribeye, I'm talking like a fried food, French fries, foods you shouldn't be eating in the first place, they will report feeling nausea and or wanting to vomit. So there's something about the way the GLP-1s work in the body. I'm guessing it has something to do with the central nausea centers in the brain. They are full of GLP-1 receptors themselves, and how dense that bed of receptors is individual by individual, right? It's different for each person. So some people are going to experience more nausea on these and some people will experience less. But we can't aggravate that, and certain foods seem to aggravate that. So the super fatty, high fat foods, fried foods, and then the ultra refined carbohydrates. Don't eat that shit anyway, you guys. It's terrible for you. Heed my warning on this one, especially if you crush those foods. You're trying to get some cheeseburgers in at night or something. It is a recipe for disaster. Trust me. I've been there myself. I've seen it happen with people. It doesn't go over well. Number 5, probably the most important one if you don't want to end up in that brittle metabolic disaster mess of wasteland that I described in number 1, which is not protecting your muscle by not prioritizing your protein macros and strength training. We have to have a talk here. This is not negotiable. If you want to go on GLP-1 agonists and have any semblance of success in the long run, you have to protect your muscle at all costs. Ladies, I'm looking at you. Older you get, the harder it is for your body to maintain its muscle mass. Most women in the United States are already walking into a hip fracture. They're walking into frailty, they're walking into sarcopenia, and they are walking into a hip fracture, if not a fracture somewhere else in their body, because of severe osteoporosis, because they didn't eat enough protein, especially in midlife, and they did not prioritize strength training. I get it. Society has done a number on us. I grew up in the generation where it was like, be as skinny as humanly possible because we had Kate Moss as a supermodel. And that was that was our goal. Like, look as wafy and malnourished as we could and as skinny as we could. I get it. We've done some serious damage to ourselves already. If you're in my age cohort, I'm 50 years old. This is middle age. We've already done a lot of damage to ourselves. We've already been exposed to a lot of terrible foods in our lifetime. We were the generation that got brought up on artificial sweeteners. We were the generation brought up with the fake fats and all the nonsense, right? We got fed all the nonsense that the big food could come up with. And it was tested on us before it was, decided if it was going to make it to the next generation. We already have osteoporosis, most women my age. Most women my age are a mess. So do not assume because you're losing weight, everything is great. Oh, I fit in my high school jeans again. Yeah, well, that's a disaster if you're all fat and bone. So you have got to prioritize strength training, and you've got to prioritize eating your protein macros. And doctors, if your patients are not complying, you pull the prescription away. I have no problem doing this. If a patient is not compliant, I do not provide the prescription anymore. It's over. That's it. Until they can be compliant, they don't get the carrot. So just heed my warning, all of you, practitioners, health professionals, general public taking these peptides. If you're not prioritizing your muscle mass and getting adequate protein in on the regular, you are shooting yourself in the foot.